ceasefire. That's when we come back. Also, a story that could only be described as bizarre. When we come back, why U.S. police say they shot this man dressed in an animal costume. The fighter jet dropped the missile late Wednesday night. It's not clear who carried out the strike. Nick Robertson has more about it and a warning for you. His report contains disturbing images.
Syria's ceasefire is in tatters. The latest, an airstrike on an opposition hospital in Aleppo. This one supported by Doctors Without Borders and the Red Cross. Dozens killed, including children and at least 3 doctors. One of them, the last pediatrician. So severe the attack, the Red Cross issued a statement saying the destruction of the hospital are putting millions at grave risk. The bodies, the grief, piling pressure on faltering peace talks in Geneva.
In the last 48 hours, we have had an average of 1 Syrian killed every 25 minutes. 1 Syrian wounded every 13 minutes.
3 weeks of talks, 1,000 miles from the front lines, little progress. The two sides using the ceasefire to talk about political transition. But accusations, not compromises, traded.
The threats that emanated from the opposition who were here in Geneva before they sulked and got upset and left, these declarations were translated on the ground into attacks.
The opposition, for their part, pausing their participation, blaming the government for a renewed offensive, making talks meaningless. Within days of pulling back from the talks, opposition fighters last week on ceasefire, shown here in their own propaganda video, back to the battlefront. The UN envoy urging Russia and the United States to step in again, save the ceasefire, save the talks.
We need that to be urgently revitalized. And only the Russian Federation and the US, as they did when they launched suddenly everything related to the cessation hostilities, needed to come back again and relaunch it.
In the meantime, the killing is escalating. No date set for the next round of peace talks. The UN envoy planning a visit to Moscow next week. Urgency and peace, both in short supply. Nick Robertson, CNN, London.
Ride on a roller coaster in Texas took a terrifying turn for a 6-year-old boy and his father when the boy's seatbelt came undone.
No. Here we go. I got you. It's fine. Hey, you're fine, I promise, okay? I got you. Hey, you're fine.
With words of reassurance, Delbert Latham put an iron grip onto his son Kaysen for the rest of the ride. He posted the video on Facebook and says the ride's operator admitted it's happened before. The amusement park later removed the malfunctioning car from the roller coaster and checked all the seat belts. And that little boy just loves his daddy even more now. Land is reportedly getting ready to propose legalizing the international trade in rhino horns. It is expected to bring up the plan at a major UN meeting on wildlife trade later this year. South African rhinos were killed in Africa for their horns, and the number has been rising ever since. Since 2008, the total has reached nearly 6,000. Today, 3 of the world's 5 rhino species are considered critically endangered, all because some people, mostly in Asia, want the rhino horn, which really has no particular benefit to humans. It's just a false belief. Kenya is hosting this year's Giants Club Summit, a meeting of African leaders focused on tackling poaching of the continent's giant animals. Poaching has led to more orphaned animals across Africa than ever before. The epidemic has left many orphaned animals, and here's Robin Creel to talk about it. In Costa Mesa, California, where police have been trying to restore order outside a Donald Trump rally. Crowds of protesters filled the streets, some rocking police cars, smashing one's back window and blocking traffic. We did see police putting several people in handcuffs, and there are reports of several fights breaking out. Trump is closing in on the Republican Party's presidential nomination. We get more from CNN's Sarah Murray on the campaign trail.
Donald Trump is hoping to finish off Ted Cruz in the Hoosier state.
If Cruz sneezes, if he just sneezes, his people leave him, believe me. In the Senate, he's known as a liar. So we came up with Lion Ted, L-Y-I-N, boom, hyphen.
Knowing if Cruz can't stop him here, the odds of blocking Trump from clinching the nomination, slim to none.
If I win, we win. It's over.
All as Cruz brushes aside Trump's criticism of his latest political ploy, choosing Carly Fiorina as his running mate before anyone's won the nomination.
Donald does one of four things. He yells, he screams, he curses, or he insults. I suppose you could start a drinking game on which one of the four Donald is going to respond to any given stimulus that might occur.
Cruz and Trump locked in a two-man race here after John Kasich agreed to stop campaigning in Indiana in exchange for Cruz skipping Oregon and New Mexico. Today, Cruz is denying that Hail Mary pass amounts to an alliance.
There is no alliance. Kasich and I made a determination where to focus our energies, where to focus our assets, where to focus our resources.
Wow. While plenty of Republicans still have reservations about Trump, others are expressing strong concerns about Cruz. Former House Speaker John Boehner blasting Cruz in an interview at Stanford University.
Lucifer in the flesh. I have many Democrat friends, I have Republican friends, I get along with almost everybody. But I have never worked with a more miserable son of a bitch.
But Cruz appears unfazed by the criticism.
John Boehner had some interesting comments last night. He actually didn't abbreviate what he said. He was a little bit more expressive. He allowed his inner Trump to come out.
Trump may be cleaning up in the primaries
because I'm winning by millions of votes.
But in the general, his numbers with women could use some work.
Thank you so much.
And today, he repeated his claim that Hillary Clinton is only winning by playing the gender card.
The primary thing that she has going is that she's a woman, and she is playing that card like I have never seen anybody play it before.
Now, even though the Trump campaign feels pretty confident about their odds here in Indiana, they're not taking anything for granted. They're actually up with a new television ad that hits Ted Cruz on free trade. Sarah Murray, CNN, Evansville, Indiana.
Reporter for the Washington Post. He is joining us from New York. Thanks for being with us, Philip.
Of course, my pleasure.
First of all, I want you to listen to a clip from Republican Congressman Peter King reacting to John Boehner's Lucifer comments. Let's take a listen.
I fully agree with John Boehner, and maybe he gives Lucifer a bad name by comparing him to Ted Cruz. Listen, what John Boehner was most concerned about was Ted Cruz perpetrated a fraud and a hoax when he brought about the shutdown of the government on some kind of a vague promise that he was going to be able to take Obamacare out of the budget or to end Obamacare. Ted Cruz knew it would never work. That it was never going to work, but he went ahead and did it anyway, shut down the government, cost the government money, so served no purpose whatsoever other than to boost his name identification. So I agree with John Boehner on that.
So Lucifer enters the presidential campaign. Do you think criticisms like this will continue to hurt Senator Cruz?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Senator Cruz is in a tough position in general. It doesn't seem as though he's likely to actually get the delegates he needs at any point at this stage, given the fact that Donald Trump has suddenly started doing so well. This has always been the critique of Ted Cruz. This is why so few of his colleagues in the Senate have endorsed him, is that he's simply not liked. And I think that Representative King makes a point there, which we've heard before, that Ted Cruz went out by himself, got this shutdown going. It stood up to John Boehner and actually rallied John Boehner's core conservative House members against John Boehner, which is why John Boehner doesn't like him. And, you know, I think that for a time period, the Republican establishment was so worried about Donald Trump that they were doing everything, including embracing Ted Cruz, which none of them wanted to do, in order to try and stop Donald Trump. I think one of the things that's changed here is because Donald Trump has gotten so close to this nomination that I think now people are dropping, to some extent, the pretense of having ever liked Ted Cruz.
Okay, good. Trump is continuing to rail against Clinton using the woman card. Does this hurt or help him with women voters, especially with Carly Fiorina back in the mix, joining Cruz?
Right. Yeah, I'm not sure Carly Fiorina adds much to the conversation, quite frankly. I think Cruz is being very deliberate in picking her so that, you know, she ran for statewide office in California. People there know her better than they do other places, for better and worse. I'm not sure that helps him a whole lot. But Donald Trump's comments absolutely do not do him any good. He tries to talk, you know, it is very similar to what we saw him do with his comments about Mexicans earlier in the race. He says things that are not welcomed by Mexican people, or in this case by women, then he claims that he's going to do well with those populations anyway, despite there being no evidence of that. His unfavorable ratings with women are much, much worse than his unfavorable ratings with men, including in the Republican Party. It's one of the reasons that he is where he is in this contest, because women simply don't want to vote for him. Some do, obviously, but much less so than men do. And if he keeps doing this, that's not going to improve with the general population. If you look, no one, if you compare where he is now in polling, post-ABC polling, among white women, which should be a core Republican constituency, he's doing worse than at any point we've ever seen in exit polling, which goes back to 1972, and that is a very bad position for him to be in.
Finally, I want to share this with you. Tuesday is the Indiana primary. The state's biggest newspaper is not endorsing any candidates.
Right.
But the editorial board says, although flawed, Kasich and Clinton offer best choices, and goes on to rail against Cruz, Sanders, and Trump, and declares, quote, a President Trump would be a danger to the United States and to the world. Will this affect Indiana at all, where Kasich has, in effect, given up?
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. It's kind of a cop-out to also say, oh, you should vote for Clinton and Kasich, but we're not doing an endorsement. But, you know, that's on them. You know, my sense is that maybe they are trying to throw a bone towards this totally failed Kasich-Cruz alliance, where Kasich was supposed to step out of Indiana so that Cruz could do better and then stop Trump from getting the delegates. I think maybe that's why they didn't do a strong endorsement race. I'm not really sure why. But, you know, I mean, I think that alliance thing has hurt Kasich. I don't think that his support is all going to Cruz. I think it's helping Trump as well. So I think it is generally a mess, and it's coming at a time when Donald Trump is doing better generally, which I think is a bad sign for the non-Trump forces.
Okie doke. We'll wait and see. We got another Tuesday up ahead. Philip Bump with the Washington Post. Thank you so much, Philip.
Thank you.
Well, former Republican presidential candidate Jeb Bush says he has no regrets about ending his campaign. He spoke with CNN special correspondent Jamie Gangel in his first interview since dropping out. She asked about his reaction to Ted Cruz's choice of Carly Fiorina as his running mate.
Picking a candidate that is talented, tough, you know, she takes on Trump really well, I think, and she takes on Hillary Clinton very well as well. Someone who's got a proven record and who's been vetted as a candidate, I thought was a smart move by Ted Cruz.
You didn't think that Donald Trump was ready to be president. But if he is the nominee, apart from whatever else you think might happen, whether he would beat Hillary or not, will you support him?
I don't think he's a serious person.
You haven't changed your mind?
No, I've seen nothing. The speech, you know, recent speech about foreign policy was, you can't, I don't know Donald Trump to believe, the one that read from a teleprompter a speech that was inside the lines, or the one that wants to build a wall and make Mexico pay for it. The idea that the president should be unpredictable is not really the way history has been written.
Jeb Bush has endorsed Ted Cruz for president, but he has not actively campaigned for him. Well, meantime, Democratic presidential candidate